So if you've been in the market for a belt squat machine, there's a good chance at some point you've come across what I'm sitting on right now, and that's the Squatmax-MD. This piece has been out for several years now. I've been a user of the Squatmax myself for about 3 years with the rack-mounted piece, and for the last couple of months, this newly designed standalone version. I've always felt that the Squatmax was really the best belt squat machine in terms of an actual belt squat, but with the rack-mounted version, I always felt that there was a limitation in what you could do, at least in comparison to some of the other pieces on the market. This new standalone version, however, has been totally redesigned to include several features that make it a much more versatile piece. In this video, we'll go deep into the Squatmax-MD. This is a bit of a longer video today, guys, so buckle up. But by the end of it, you should be able to tell if it's right for you. More on that coming up. Hey, what's up, friends? I'm glad you're here because today is yet another perfect day to talk about gym equipment. Hey guys, my name is Adam with Garage Gym Lab, and if you're new here, this channel is all about testing and reviewing gym equipment, building the home gym community, and providing inspiration to anybody out there who's looking to build their dream gym. So if that's something you're into, I definitely encourage you to subscribe. That way you can stay up to date with all the content. So before we get into the details of the device itself, I first want to talk about some of the benefits of belt squats, as well as some of the different styles of belt squat machines. The biggest benefit of a belt squat is to be able to perform squats without loading the spine. If you're someone who's had or has a back injury, or if you generally just suffer from lower back pain, then you know that barbell back squats can be painful or in some cases not possible at all. The great thing about a belt squat is it puts all of the load directly on the hips, which still allows you to hit the legs hard, but without the risk or concern of injury or re-injury to your back. Another benefit of the belt squat is it doesn't require the use of your arms, at least in the same sense as you would find on something like a barbell back squat. So if you're somebody who has shoulder or upper extremity issues, pain, discomfort, lack of mobility, etc., then this can create a much more comfortable lifting experience while again allowing you to hit the legs hard. And lastly, belt squat machines are really versatile. They extend beyond just a traditional belt squat. From marches to deadlifts to rows to curls to glute bridges and more, you can do a lot with them, which has made them a really popular choice among the home gym crowd where versatility is really important. Now, not all belt squat designs are the same, and each one has their own pros and cons, but essentially you've got three main styles of belt squats. You've got your cable-based belt squats, you've got your lever-based belt squats, and then you've got your free weight-based belt squats. When you think about a cable-based belt squat machine, you may be thinking of Louis Simmons and Westside Barbell, and rightfully so, considering he's one of the pioneers behind belt squats in general. The Westside ATP is a great example of a cable-based belt squat machine. It has a huge platform to allow for a lot of different movements, ranging from split squats to marches to belt squats, of course, and really any other movement that you can perform using a low pulley position. The downside to the ATP is that it's very expensive, over $4,000, and it's also very big. It takes up about 30 square feet, about 7.5 feet deep and 4 feet wide. The more popular and more economical option would be the Rogue Rhino. It's smaller, it's less expensive at under $2,000, and while it does have a smaller platform, it's still a very versatile piece. And then you've got DIY solutions or even some integrated rack attachments similar to the Rep belt squat, but in my opinion, those are really inferior when compared to some of the other cable-based belt squats on the market. When you think of a lever-based belt squat, you may think of the Winning belt squat. He really popularized this style, which includes a platform, 2 loadable side sleeves, and a fixed anchor point. This allows you to perform movements ranging from belt squats to marches to rows, etc. But again, it's also very big and expensive, takes up about 34 square feet, and it costs nearly $4,000. Now, there's since been the introduction of lower cost alternatives from the likes of Titan and Bells of Steel and Edge Fitness, etc., but they all basically do the same thing. You may also recognize the Pit Shark, which is again another large and expensive piece, but which is, in my opinion, inferior to the Winning style. From there, you have single post devices, which may include a landmine attachment or the Squatmax J Squat. These are much more economically sized and priced, but like the Pit Shark, they come with a clear mechanical advantage, which effectively reduces the amount of weight you're actually lifting. Lastly, you have the free weight based belt squat. Originally, and I think also used by Louis before the ATP, lifters would stand on blocks or something else elevated and then hang weights directly underneath them from a dip belt, which is, to be sure, the best position for a belt squat because it produces a purely vertical load. This is also the advantage compared to a cable or especially a lever-based system, which has a forward weight position and/or which includes a fixed fulcrum. That fixed fulcrum can pull the belt forward, which increases the shear on the lumbar. And again, it can create a distinct mechanical advantage, which forces you to load more weight to achieve a desired stimulus. So the great thing about a free weight based belt squat is that it's more effective. The downside to the old school way is that it's hard to set up. You really need a partner to remove the weight shelf. And it's not the safest thing having two independent blocks and no real way to quickly ditch the weight if you need it. That's where the Squatmax comes into play because it basically takes all of those biomechanical advantages and it makes it easier to use, safer to use, and it's more versatile. It also takes up less space compared to most other systems. It costs less than most other systems and it works better. There's been several independent peer-reviewed studies that have compared other styles to the Squatmax. Most notably in the fall of 2020, a study by Gulick and Gulick titled A Comparison of Muscle Activation of 3 Different Hip Belt Squat Techniques compared the Squatmax to the Rogue Rhino and the Pit Shark. It concluded that the Squatmax achieved greater muscle activation in every muscle tested, with 3 of 4 of those muscles experiencing significantly more muscle activation. I'll put a link in the description down below, but the Rhino finished second and the Pit Shark finished third. Aside from that, guys like Blaine Sumner, Big Ray Williams, and Tanoi Reed, aka the Rock Stuntman, are all using the Squatmax with great success. With that being said, let's get into the review itself because there are quite a few things to unpack here. Right off the bat, you're likely to notice that the Squatmax is very simply designed and it's pretty compact. Measuring 45 inches by 39 inches, it takes up just over 12 square feet, making it one of the most space-efficient belt squats on the market. For comparison, the Rogue Rhino is a little over 22 square feet, so roughly double the footprint. The Squatmax sits 20 inches off the ground, something I'll get into a little bit more momentarily in terms of setting up the hip belt as well as the narrow stance riser. But just in terms of pure ceiling clearance, most people are going to be fine as long as you have at least an 8-foot ceiling. This isn't all steel construction, so just the base unit without attachments weighs about 130 pounds. And if you have it fully decked out like I do, then it's going to weigh around 260 pounds. When you receive the Squatmax, it'll be shipped freight on a pallet in a series of boxes. You'll get the main platform, the legs, a cross piece with band pegs, a guide rod, a loading pin, a limiting strap, a transformer pin, 2 weight shelves, 2 handles, a seat, the hip belt, 3 carabiners, a narrow stance riser, and a narrow stance overlay. Now I know that sounds like a lot, but once you actually have it all put together, it really isn't all that much at all. You also have the option to purchase the package with the J-cups as well as the adjustable pad. And then further than that, you can purchase the package that includes all of it plus the hip thrust attachment. Don't worry, I'll be going through all of these attachments here in just a minute. In general, the Squatmax is very easy to assemble. All in, it takes less than 5 minutes and it uses a series of pins and a few bolts in that bottom cross member. The legs actually angle outward to create a very stable platform. There's not going to be any wobble in this system unless you have a floor with some substantial elevation changes. And the nice thing about it is if you're tight on space in your gym, or if you move your equipment around with any type of frequency, you can break this down and put it back together pretty quickly. So starting with the basics, the Squatmax uses a top-loaded loading pin that's hollow to slide over a guide rod. It measures around 21 3/4 inch tall, and it's built to accommodate any standard Olympic-sized plate, whether that's an iron plate or a bumper plate. I do tend to recommend iron plates if you've got them, if only because they have a thinner profile, which allows you to load more weight onto the pin. In terms of actual capacity on the pin itself, You can easily load 500 pounds plus. However, you do need to use progressively narrower plates the higher you get up. Since we're creating a triangle with our legs, you really have to do that in order to avoid potentially hitting your legs when doing a squat. Unless, of course, you're built like SpongeBob. Keep in mind that 500 pounds of plate load on the Squatmax is going to be extremely challenging for most people. And if it's not challenging enough, you can always add hundreds of pounds of additional band tension, something that I'll get to more here momentarily. Attached to the bottom of the loading pin and to the top of the bottom cross member is this limiting strap. And all this does is it prevents the loading pin from sliding off the guide rod. Most people aren't going to have an issue with this, but if you are living on the edge in that top position, then it could slide out. And that's never fun for anybody, although it is good for a laugh every once in a while. What? When it comes to the hole opening on the Squatmax, it's actually not a perfect circle. North to south, it's around 21 inches, and east to west, it measures around 19 inches. And this is by design to make it easier to load and unload plates. But one thing to point out is that although this is 21 inches, this top half is actually about an inch shorter than the bottom half. And since it's not perfectly centered, you still may scrape your knuckles from time to time. The other thing to point out is that top loading plates is generally more cumbersome than side loading plates. So I would highly recommend you use some sort of a spacer between your plates. Otherwise, it makes it very difficult to grip and remove or add plates. So Squatmax actually sells some steel spacers, or you can just use change plates, which is what I used for a long time, but it makes it much, much easier to load and unload plates with spacers. On the bottom of the loading pin, you'll see two band pegs. If you want to use band tension, you're going to want to make sure that these are facing north to south. Underneath the main platform, on that bottom cross member, you'll see 4 band pegs. This is where your bands are actually going to live. It's very easy to set up and you can use any standard length band that you want, whether that's from Elite FTS, Rogue, Squatmax, or really anywhere else. All you do to set it up is loop it around one of the bottom band pegs, then go around and up the opposite side, bring it back to the starting side, and loop it above. From there, you can determine how much band tension you want by picking between 1 to 4 layers of your band. The next thing to consider is the belt itself. The multi-hip belt was created by Brian Hennessy from Squatmax, and in my opinion, it's the best belt squat belt on the market. It's not only very comfortable, but it's also very accommodating for a number of user heights. So it's got 7 loops on there, each spaced 2 inches apart, so you can quickly and easily find your ideal position based on where you're not bottoming out. For instance, I'm 5'8". I like to have my carabiner clipped into that top position or the second to top position. Once you get your position figured out, all you do is clip that into the swiveling eye bolt on the top of the loading pin. When you're ready to lift, rotate those handles outwards to release the weight shelves, and there you go. Purely vertical load, squat down, do your thing, and then when you're ready, rotate those handles back in, and then you're re-racked. Now, speaking of the handles, they can be used technically as a support for your hands, although since they're not fixed, I don't really recommend that you use them in that way. For me, I just like to put my hands in a boxing position or just stick them out and through those handles. I do think that Squatmax is working on a fixed bar of sorts for that purpose, but just something to be mindful of in the meantime. Okay, so that's the basic operation of the Squatmax. Let's now pivot and talk about some of the attachments, which is really where Squatmax has seen the most substantial improvements over prior iterations. The first one we'll talk about is the box seat. This was actually a standard feature on the original standalone Squatmax, although that was a much bigger unit, and they didn't include it on the rack-mounted version. The box seat can be used for 2 things. Firstly, you can use it for box squats. There's a square cutout right here in the back that you can slide the seat in and then secure it with a wire lock pin. There's a total of 10 height adjustments. In the most bottom position, you actually don't have to use the pin, and it sits 8.5 inches off the top of the platform. In the highest position, which you do of course have to use the pin, it sits 19.5 inches off the top of the platform. There's a total of 9 holes to choose from, each spaced 1 inch apart. You can also orient the box seat to be facing forward or backward, depending on how hard you want to hip hinge or how far you want to sit back. So between that and the height adjustment, you can really dial it in based on user height and desired ranges of motion. The second way that you can use the seat is as a foot or leg rest for seal rows. On the sides of the main platform are two similar size square cutouts, so you can position the seat there and then throw something soft like a piece of foam or something else on top, and voila, you've got a leg rest. Which takes me into the next attachment, which is the adjustable pad. This works very similar to the Bulldog pad from Sornex in that it's got multiple angles that you can easily adjust. It just uses two long pins. It's got 6 total adjustments. And then you can also adjust the height, just like you can on the box seat. It ranges from 13 inches to the top of the pad from the top of the platform, all the way to 20 inches across 9 different options. The pad itself is 2.5 inches thick, and it's firm but pretty comfortable. As it relates to the box seat and that footrest, you can set them up opposite sides of each other at the same height, and then you can perform a full-blown seal row. Now, I don't know of any other belt squats on the market that can allow for something like this, so in my opinion, this is a pretty cool feature, especially considering the fact that dedicated seal row benches are very expensive and they take up even more space in your gym. Now, you're not going to get full body coverage like you would on a dedicated seal row bench, which is definitely a disadvantage when you're comparing the two of those, but this is, in my opinion, still a nice solution regardless. On the side of the Squatmax, you can add the Squatmax J-cups. These have 2 layers of UHMW, which you apply during assembly. As you can see, these are very thin. You're not getting a thick cut like you do on a sandwich cup on your rack, for instance. And while I would like to see something thicker, I don't think this is a huge deal because these aren't going to be taking nearly as much abuse in terms of weight or frequency as your rack cups would, and you can replace these strips pretty easily. You'll also note that these J-cups sit pretty close together, so you're not going to be able to load one side of the barbell and not the other like you would on a barbell in your rack, for instance, otherwise it's going to tip over. So it's best to just load the bar on the ground and then lift it up to the J-cups. The other thing to point out is this stabilizing piece that extends out from the platform. All this does is prevents the Squatmax from tipping over when you have a loaded barbell on it, and it can also be used as an anchor point for bands. The other way that you can use this adjustable pad is with chest supported rows coming into the Squatmax. This is how I use it most frequently, and it works really, really well. You can use a barbell, you can use dumbbells, you can use kettlebells, etc. And along with the angle adjustment and the height adjustment, you can really fine tune it to your liking. Another thing to consider is that if you are using a barbell with the Squatmax, you're going to want to make sure that you have enough room to accommodate the full length of the bar. That may mean moving the Squatmax temporarily to allow for that, or you could have enough space to allow for it just sitting where it is. Obviously, I'm in the middle of my gym right here just for demonstration purposes. Normally I have this set off to the side, but it still accommodates the full length of the bar well for me. Next up, we have the transformer pin. This is a very simple pin that has an eye bolt on one side that allows you to effectively offset the load to either be more quad dominant or more glute dominant. You can also further influence that by using one of 2 height options on the loading pin itself. So for example, if I were to have the pin positioned in this way, it would be more quad dominant. And if I had it in the other way, it would be more glute dominant. And you can definitely tell a difference when using the transformer pin. One thing to keep in mind is you are angling the loading pin when you're doing this, so it is going to scrape against that guide rod and be a lot louder than it would otherwise if you didn't have the transformer pin in at all. The other thing to consider is if you're in the quad setting, it's going to want to make that loading pin spin. So that's why Squatmax includes this strap to prevent that. It's easy to apply. All you do is use the band peg on the loading pin, and it does a great job of locking that down. Here we have the narrow stance riser and the narrow stance overlay. These are used to allow you to perform things like marches and of course narrow stance squats. It uses a slide and hook to secure it to the main platform, and it adds 7 inches in height. The purpose of the riser is that it allows you to add more weight than you would otherwise be able to achieve if you just put the overlay on top of the main platform. Now, you're not going to be able to use as much weight as you would if you were just using the main platform on a regular squat, but it does allow for that. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you're going to be adding 7 inches to the height. That could create some clearance issues in terms of the ceiling height for some users. So you just need to do the math and see if that's going to be an issue for you. I don't personally use these attachments very much. I find the regular squats are perfectly suitable for me. But if you like to do marches or narrow stand squats, then I can certainly see the value in them. And finally, we have the hip thrust attachment. This is a really cool feature if you're a heavy hip thrust user. There is a bit of setup on this attachment, however, but once you get it done once, it's pretty easy thereafter. So on the sides, you're gonna have 2 anchor straps, which are gonna connect to 2 carabiners. Once you have those attached, you can simply slide it over the guide rod. This is essentially gonna be your new loading pin. So you can add weight to it if you want, or you can just use band tension since this also has band pegs. From there, you can attach the Squatmax deadlift bar into the loading pin itself using the same pin that you use on the box seat. All this does is it creates a very comfortable position for your legs. It's not required. You're gonna use the adjustable angled pad as your back support. I like to have a steep angle and in the high position, so I've got that set up right here. Now just get into position on the back pad, anchor your feet to the platform, and get underneath the hip belt that you've attached to the carabiners on the actual hip thrust attachment. Whenever you're ready, simply turn those handles out, release the weight shelves, and now all of a sudden, you're hip thrusting. You can also set up the box seat for an elevated foot position, although I tend to just like the main platform. Whenever you're done, return the handles and you're re-racked. Now, the most difficult part about the hip thrust attachment is the racking and unracking. If you have short arms, it can be a bit of a reach. And if you're coming off of an exhausting set, it can be really hard to rack because you've got to hold that position until you can bring in both of those shelves. If you've got a partner, they can do it for you and it really is no consequence at all, but this is just something to consider. Otherwise, it's a very effective hip thrust. One attachment that I would really like to see, and one that I think Squatmax may actually be working on, is an adjustable height platform attachment for box jumps. This would include a soft edge, similar to what you would find on something like the Roundups, and you could essentially go from 20 inches, which is platform height, to over 40 inches in the matter of seconds. Another attachment that I know Squatmax is working on are a pair of uprights that you can position in those square cutouts on the sides of the main platform where you can actually put a barbell and use that in tandem with the hip belt squat. I know this is a longer review, guys, so if you've stuck with me for this long, you're the real MVP. But in my opinion, this version of the Squatmax is far superior than any other iteration that they've put out in the past. It's a lot better than the original standalone version, and although it has the same size as the rack-mounted version, which is great, it's a lot more versatile. In addition to some of the movements that I've shown so far in this video, you can do things like deadlifts, split squats, back rows, etc. And if you want, you can check out the Squatmax-MD Instagram page. They put a lot of these on display. I'll link it down below. Having used the Squatmax for the last several years and this specific unit for the last couple of months, I'm a huge proponent and advocate for the product in general. I think it's the best piece for an actual belt squat movement on the market, given its totally free and vertical load. And it's been scientifically shown to have increased muscle activation compared to other systems. It's smaller than other systems, and it's less expensive than the Rhino, the ATP, the Winning, etc. Now, that's not to say that those pieces aren't nice, because they are. You can do a lot with them. They're very versatile. In fact, depending on your training style, they may be more versatile. But again, when it comes to an actual belt squat movement, from my perspective, nothing beats the Squatmax-MD. In terms of price, the base unit, which includes the seat, the riser, the belt, etc., is going to run you $1,619, which includes shipping. If you want to do the Mac Daddy package, which includes everything, then that's going to run you $1,969, again, which also includes shipping. So what do you guys think? Is the Squatmax-MD a cool piece? Is this something that you would like to add to your gym? How do you think it stacks up to the competition? Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video. Until then, be well, and we'll chat soon.